been wanting to play this for over 1 year and I finally got to do it. It took me a year to play it, but I can finally say that I have played and beaten Lies of P. Funny enough, at the time of this video, Lies of P is actually on sale. So who knows, this video might go and convince someone to play the game. Sponsor me, Pinocchio! Please keep in mind that the gameplay used in this video has been taken directly from my stream, so please don't use it as a full indication of how the game looks. But with that said, inspired by games such as Bloodborne and Sekiro, developers Round 8 Studio and NeoWiz took it upon themselves to look at the story of Pinocchio and decided that they wanted to throw their hands into the Souls-like genre. And I think it turned out pretty good. But let's get into it. I would say that this is more of a hybrid between Sekiro and Bloodborne than any of the other Souls games. So if you are a fan of those two, you are in for a good time. Lies of P borrows the health regain mechanics of Bloodborne, where if you take damage or block an attack, you are able to regain a portion of your health back by returning damage, which creates an aggressive playstyle. And to hell with this, we borrow the parry mechanic from our good friend Sekiro, except the parry time is way more tighter in Lies of P. By perfect guarding an attack, you will not only negate all damage, but also get closer to bringing them to stagger. Here we perform a strong strike to stun our enemy, which allows us to do a fatal attack, which does a lot of damage. So if you aren't dodging, it is time to get used to parrying. When it comes to healing, luckily it doesn't take the consumable route Bloodborne did, as it works more akin to Elden Ring, where you have a set amount of pulse cells, which is this game's Estus flasks. That reset either on death, or if you find a Stargazer to rest at. Now, I personally run through these like a kid in a candy shop. I devour these cells non-stop, so I am very fortunate that in Lies of P, even if we use all of our pulse cells, we are given the opportunity to re-earn them by dealing damage to the enemy, which may have saved my tush once or twice. With attacking and parrying, we have the use of Legion arms. Now, honestly, I didn't really use these as much as I should have, but I did use a bit of the grappling hook and shield in my playthrough. However, there is many arms to choose from, such as landmines, shooting out fire, and even a gun. All of the Legion arms have their own upgrade paths and seem to be efficient. But come on, it's gotta be the grappling hook or the shield. It's just so fun. But not as fun as being able to assemble our own weapon and use Fable Arts. Depending on your weapon loadout, your Fable Arts can allow you to buff yourself, parry enemy attacks, create a fire explosion, decrease stamina consumption, and perform hard-hitting combos. Your Fable Arts will depend on the hilt and blade on your weapon, which is where the assemble mechanic comes in. Basically, you can make life like Dead Rising 2 and combine together any blade and any handle you find in the game. And damn, does this game give you a lot to work with. From big fuck-off hammers, fire daggers, katanas, electric bats, glaives, rapiers, you name it. This game has a lot to play with. We can also upgrade our blades using crafting materials that you find around Krat. However, by changing the handle, this will change how a weapon swings, its stats, and what scaling the weapon uses, which allows you to use any weapon that you want, giving you complete freedom of how you tackle this game, which is one of my favorite features personally. When it comes to stats, it is pretty much your standard Souls-like. You upgrade the stamina, you want a little bit more damage, and you want a lot more health, which you level up using Ergo at Hotel Krat that you gain from defeating enemies and using fragments found during the travels. But there is also a skill tree system in this game that I'm quite fond of as well. As we defeat bosses or complete side quests, we unlock quartz. We use these to enhance our abilities and bonuses. I actually really like this system as it made a big difference in my experience. But how it works is bonuses require a certain amount of quartz to activate them. For example, if I wanted to increase the efficiency of pulse cells, it needed me to use 2 quartz. So I'd go ahead and use them to enhance both Fable Art damage and health recovery to fully unlock that slot. As you continue to fill the skill tree, more bonuses will continue to open up that will require a larger amount of quartz to activate them fully. And with the amount of times I've been hit with decay, overheat, shock, I really needed those elemental buffs. Now, the best way to test combat is always the boss fights, and let me say, for the most part, I think Lies of P does a great job in this department. I enjoyed probably 95% of the bosses in this game. While I don't think many of them have the most memorable designs in the world, they do manage to make almost all of them fun. And most importantly, pretty balanced, which I'm surprised by, as we all know it can get pretty rough out there. I also understand there has been numerous patches since release, and I imagine that they have made a number of changes. But still, praise be to Pinocchio! There is a number of large bosses in this game, so sometimes the camera may be against you, especially when they jump to the sky and you can't see shit because the camera wants you to look at the back of his head instead. Like, I get it, you know, nice head, bro, but please parry the attack. Surprisingly, there isn't many gimmick bosses in Lies of P. A lot of them are just straight up fights, which I appreciate. As there was a few fights I loved so much, I was laughing and smiling while I was getting pummeled into the ground like a maniac. Bosses work as you can expect them to. However, in this game, they will glow red when they are going for a strong attack. Now, for these, you have to haul ass out of the way or go for that perfect parry, as there are a number of these attacks that can actually lock onto you and will deal a fuck ton of damage. So, it's in your best interest to avoid that one. And yes, all boss attacks can be parried, so go ahead, start clicking that guard button like no tomorrow. Overall, I died 117 times or something like that. And even I can say that this is probably one of the more easier Souls-like games out there, but don't go into this game thinking it's a cakewalk because it will humble you. These fights also introduce phases really well, as it starts with 1 phase bosses, goes to middle phase, and ends at bosses having 2 phases. I will say, however, as I got closer to the end of the game, they really went hard on enemy balance, where everything and everyone had high health pools, and delayed attacks, which is both a positive and a negative by itself, depending how you feel about it. For me, I thought it was a nice way to make sure I get into the flow of a fight while keeping me on my toes, because if I unfocus for a second, I would become sliced bread. So overall, while the camera could be against you and delayed attacks may tick you off, the bosses are solid, but probably not the most memorable. Just to touch on the story a little bit, we play as a puppet in the island of Krat, where a murderous puppet rampage and the petrification disease has swept through the town, and we have the unfortunate job of being tasked to be the one to fix it. The game begins with us being woken up by a strange female voice who wants us to deal with all the madness that's going down, and leads us to the hub of the game, Hotel Krat, where we make a few friends. Now this sends us on a wonderful adventure of rainbows where we deal with all kinds of beings, including both puppets and disease-ridden monsters. Most areas we run through in this game are pretty linear, so outside a few locations you won't find yourself getting too lost. You just kind of run straight and boom, there you go, another shortcut, oh Stargazer. Yo, don't worry though, it is not completely linear. There is some levels where maybe you're going around a corner looking for elevators and all that good stuff, but other than those standouts, it is a pretty linear experience. I do want to add that I really appreciate how this game handles the side quests. If you have what is required to advance in a quest, the fast travel main menu will show either the portrait of a character or an object you now hold, which I found extremely helpful, as I have the memory of a goldfish, so the reminder is much appreciated. Narratively, the most interesting aspect is, much like the story, there is heavy emphasis on telling the truth or lying, as these actions have impact on the game and the endings themselves. But of course, I had to take every opportunity I could to show that I am not a robot, but instead a human who sits on a throne of lies. The environments and presentation in Lies of P is probably my favorite aspect about the entire game. As we go through mansions, old warehouses, and even swamps, the world is always dark, gritty, and mysterious, just like the UK, which perfectly fits the story they are trying to tell. When walking through the streets of Krat, you can see puppets trying to get through windows, humans dying from the petrification diseases, and even French music being played out of scratchy speakers, which all create an immersive experience when Unreal Engine wasn't making my game stutter. I played this on PC, and while I didn't run into many problems, there were moments on first boot up where it would get a little laggy, or sometimes I'd have to restart the game due to frame drops. But other than that, this was a really well optimized game, and I don't even have that beefy of a PC. Hey, I gotta mention that the soundtrack has made its way to my Spotify list. While I don't think many of the boss tracks are memorable, the best songs in the game come from the vinyls you can collect by doing side quests, and pretty much all of them are worth the effort. From songs like Feel, Shadowflower, and Fascination, the soundtrack of this game should not be slept on, so I just wanted to mention it. To sum it up, the main issues I came across is that the last 25% of the game has some really rough balancing, as it jumps from being enemies being pretty weak to suddenly everything feels like a mini-boss. When it got to this point, I ended up just running past everybody as I felt more tedious than it did rewarding to fight them. And if you don't like boss fights that rely on delayed moves, well, you might get a bit ticked off. But as they are pretty much the only issues I have with this game, it's pretty hard not to recommend it. Lies of P is an incredible Souls-like, and if I was to give it a number, I would probably give it an 8 or a 9. So yes, Lies of P is absolutely worth your time, especially if you are a fan of Sekiro or Bloodborne. Just want to thank you for watching the video and getting through my Lies of P impressions. It was an incredible game, but that is enough of me talking about it. If you have any opinions on Lies of P or any Souls-like, or I don't know, my hair, whatever, feel free to drop them down below. But until next time, I shall see you when I see you.